Hey, welcome to another episode of the Speak for Yourself podcast. My name is Casey, and I'm your host tonight. And I'm so glad that you decided to join us. For my guest tonight, I have Mr. Reed Coverdale. How are you doing, Reed?
Doing well, Casey. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Right before we went live, I was saying that you were someone that I looked up to when I first entered the libertarian sphere a couple of years ago, and it's been smooth sailing ever since. And it's been interesting watching you and your views evolve from when I came in and to where they are now. Um, so one of the things that I want to get into tonight is just your journey to libertarianism, from wherever you started, and then how it's evolved in the past couple of years. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So you've probably seen the picture of me as a 10-year-old with the George Bush sign, the Bush Cheney sign from 2004. So growing up, I was very conservative, very pro-military, very pro-police, everything. And that permeated into high school. And then when I graduated high school and I started working, I started having run-ins with police occasionally, and not through any mischief. It was through work, because I got my CDL and I had to go through way stations and stuff. And I was just dealing with asshole cops all the time. And so I think the first area I started really uh, doubting my conservative past was the police. That was one of the first things that that started to change. And then the other thing, I'd never been like really pro OSHA or anything, but I just realized what a disaster the regulatory state was in general, and how by trying to basically legislate accidents away, what they really were doing was legislating common sense away. So you'd have to wear a harness when you're 4 feet off the ground. I mean, what good is a harness going to do you 4 feet off the ground? So eventually, I started thinking, okay, if if it's such a mess at this level, why would it be any better at a higher level? Why would the CIA or the FBI or the military or the people running the economy, or why would any of it be any more cohesive than this is? And in so I graduated high school in 2012. In like 2014, I started looking into Rand Paul, and I was impressed with a lot of things he said, specifically surrounding foreign policy, a lot of stuff about the war in Syria that was going on, and saying we shouldn't be
Rand or
harming
Ron?
these. Rand.
Rand. Okay.
Yeah. And I really and I had kind of paid attention to Ron Paul in 2012, but I actually didn't turn 18 until May of 2012, so I didn't get to vote for him in the New Hampshire primary anyway. And I didn't look into it enough. I just kind of liked him because I thought, oh, this guy says what he thinks, and he's right that these other Republicans don't actually want to cut any spending. But Rand Paul was when I really started kind of internalizing the broader message of libertarianism. And so I didn't campaign for him or anything, but I was a big supporter of his through 2015. And then obviously he didn't make it very far in the election. He dropped out in February, I think, of 2016. So or might have even been January. It was right after the Iowa caucus. He dropped out. So I voted for Gary Johnson in November of 2016, but I thought he was a bit of a joke. And not even just the Aleppo thing, because honestly, even though I was interested in the war in Syria, I didn't even know what Aleppo was when that whole thing happened. Like, I had to, like, what is he? Oh, okay, Aleppo, Syria, yeah, whatever. But he didn't seem to be very well informed or very serious about anything. Um, and I thought that kind of the whole Libertarian Party. So even though I voted for him, I never joined the party. And then I was pretty apolitical until 2019, when Tulsi Gabbard ran for president, and she was really speaking about how these endless wars are destroying our country. And she talked a lot about civil liberties and several issues I really agreed with her on. So I actually worked on her campaign. I met her in New Hampshire and campaigned for her for several months until the New Hampshire primary. And then she ended up endorsing Joe Biden, and Trump had just been awful, in 2019 and early 2020. And then how he started handling COVID, signing all the spending bills. I was like, man, I I don't have a horse in this race anymore. So I guess I'll just get involved with the Libertarian Party. So it was in early 2020. I joined the Libertarian Party of Utah. That's where I was living at the time. And I also started my podcast in, I think it was in May of 2020. And then things kind of took off from there. And here we are.
Awesome. And, when I think of like a meteoric rise, the first person that comes to mind is Clint, but you also kind of had that same rise with the Naturalist Capitalist.
Yeah, it was kind of weird, honestly, because I mean, I've honestly read like 3 Rothbard books and just listened to a lot of Peter Schiff podcasts and just know some stuff. I remember in early 2020, I was thinking about starting a podcast, and I thought, I don't know enough to do a podcast. But then I would listen to someone like Kyle Kulinski talk, and I was like, man, like maybe I should just start a podcast because these guys are fucking retarded. So I did. And the other thing you asked in the first question I failed to answer was how did I change from 2020 to now, or like since becoming a libertarian, what has changed about me? And when I first got into this sphere, I was really professional and really, you know, I don't know what the right word is. Just I thought like if we present these ideas in a really reasonable and sophisticated and professional way, people will understand where we're coming from. And
You think it was like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed sort of thing?
yeah, and then it was really after the COVID spending of 2020 was all passed, especially the second huge stimulus bill in December, and then January 6th happening and everything going insane. I was just like, what? I don't really think that most people want to believe any of this stuff, or most people are going to listen to this stuff, or most people are going to be logically convinced of any of this. And that became increasingly obvious throughout 2021 and then 2022, especially with the midterm elections, seeing how the Democrats won almost everything that they had. The Republicans got a little bit, but the Democrats kept most of their seats. Even, like Gretchen Whitmer got reelected after what an awful dictator she was. And
Unbelievable.
it's just become extremely obvious to me over the last few years that most people are never going to be libertarians. And this idea that we just need to articulate our positions in the right way and then they'll come flocking to us, it's just bullshit. It's not true. I mean, the idea of libertarianism is not popular. It's the idea that you are responsible for taking care of yourself, and people don't want to hear that. And they want to either have somebody doing everything for them, or they want to be in control of what everybody else is doing. Those are the two most common types of people you're going to run into. The type of person who just wants to be left alone to himself and just control his own life, like that's a small minority of the public. And I think I came to realize that over the last few years. And my philosophy hasn't actually changed much in the last few years. I still believe almost everything I did 3 years ago. There's been a couple things that I've probably changed on a little bit, but just my approach has become drastically different because I don't think that there's going to be a libertarian awakening and that people are, going to come flocking to us. I think our ideas are very unpopular. And most people want to be ruled or to rule over others. And we need to start coming to grips with that.
Yeah, something that you said on Kyle's show in Health and Liberty, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, I found very interesting. And speaking of Kyle,
Oh, there he is. He's a faggot. No, I'm just kidding. He's great.
I actually donned the flannel in honor of tonight
Oh, there you go.
when I usually just wear, a t-shirt. That's awesome. Anyway, something that you said on his show that I found really interesting was that, the general consensus is that when people get tired of, the duopoly and, things are going bad, that's when they're going to look to a third option. But what you said on his show was the exact opposite of that. And it showed in the election numbers between, I think, 2016 and then the 2020 election. You said something along the lines of it's actually when things are going great and people aren't afraid that they're going to lose their jobs or this and that. That's when people look to a third party.
Yeah, I mean, in my own family, in 2016, my brothers and I voted for Gary Johnson, and my sister voted for Jill Stein, and my parents didn't vote. And then this last time around, my dad and I voted for Joe Jorgensen, and everybody else voted for Biden. And one of my brothers just didn't vote, but the other guy who voted for Biden, like his lifestyle is pretty indistinguishable from mine. He owns guns and he believes in freedom, and but he was just so sick of Donald Trump's antics that he didn't care. He just wanted him out of there. And there, he'd probably be the same type of guy who would go the other way this time and just be like, man, I'm just so sick of Biden. I don't really care who it is. And I think the worse things get, the more people think that way. So if your neighborhood has riots and burning houses and people flipping cars over, you're not thinking about, man, maybe I should really reevaluate my philosophical underpinnings for my political positions. You're thinking like, holy crap, who is going to stop this from happening? You don't even really care about anything else. So the idea that people are just going to come back to the table and think about like, all right, where did I go wrong? Maybe I just need to reevaluate my entire political philosophy. That happens when things are good because people have time to think about that and they don't have other things that are as pressing that they're as concerned about. So maybe they'll be more willing to listen to you talk about, well, the Federal Reserve does this and this is why, our money is this way and there's a genocide happening overseas. And, then maybe they'll listen to that kind of abstract stuff. But if things are hectic, then they're not going to listen.
So in other words, this next year's not our year.
No, I don't think so. I think it'll be worse than 2020. And I know that the takeover has been kind of a flop and things aren't really going anywhere, but I don't think it even matters. And I don't blame Angela or Michael Heiss or any of those people. I think, I think even if Dave were running right now and had announced and had a ton of momentum behind his campaign, I really don't think it would matter. I think it would make a difference of a couple percentage points at most. So I don't know. I don't think it really matters.
Yeah, I think if Dave ran, it would give people, in the Mises Caucus, someone to rally behind and finally, like, I don't know. My whole thing with a libertarian running for president right now and, not having a shot at it, which is what I believe, is to use that platform to plant seeds of liberty and debate people and make them look like fools, that sort of thing. And then the actual activism you can do is take it from the ground up, like your local stuff. That's kind of where I'm at with it. Does that make sense? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't think that let me just say it this way. I don't think that a lot of the things we're doing now we had to take over a political party to do, like doing the rallies that have happened, getting the messaging out on Twitter. Like, I feel like this all could have been done through some other venue than taking over a political party. I mean, there's been some benefits, like I think, because like with the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire, the reason we make international headlines with our posts is because we're an official party account. So there are definitely some things that do benefit it, but it seems like if we had a PAC, or if we, just started some sort of group that wasn't reliant on all these political calculations and all these, party bureaucratic bullshit measures that we have to go through. It seems like we could do something to the same effect that we've been doing without the Libertarian Party. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I tend to agree with that. I think it's beneficial that the official Libertarian Party Twitter account, has better messaging. So I'm a fan of that. But yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a fan of any of the people running right now. I think there's 4 or 5 that have announced. And honestly, like, I read the names and I know one of them off the top of my head. Like, I've heard his name, like I'm familiar with it, but not with any of the others. And that's a problem, because if you're not like on Twitter in the Liberty sphere, and like I don't recognize you, uh, in my opinion, you're probably not like a great speaker or orator, because we would have heard of you by now, that sort of thing. And I think it's going to take a great speaker and orator to, if we're doing kind of what I was saying earlier, where the presidential candidate is, planting those seeds. I think it's going to take a great speaker and orator. So, I'm a little disheartened by the lack of that, I guess. So, even if there's no chance of winning or anything like that, I do think it's important that we have someone that does that.
Well, look at it this way. I mean, Dave Smith has already been on Joe Rogan, like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 times, something like that. He just went on Patrick Bet David's show again the other night. He's been on Tim Pool a bunch of times. I mean, what is our get those ideas out there, right? Like, that's what we're saying the whole plan is.
Can you repeat
He's
that
doing
last
that
sentence you
already.
cut out?
Oh, okay. I was saying the whole point of getting someone to run for president that we've been talking about is to have someone like Dave get on a huge platform and just sell the libertarian message. But he's been doing that for a while now. Like, he's been on with what's his name, with Glenn Beck. He's been on, Fox News a bunch of times. He's been on Rogan 6 or 7 times. He's been on Tim Pool. He's been on Patrick Bet David. He's been on Megyn Kelly. Like, he's been everywhere. And every time he goes on them, he talks about this important stuff. But nothing has happened. We haven't seen the Libertarian Party get bigger. We haven't seen like thousands of people suddenly start embracing these ideas. So I think we've kind of been lying to ourselves that if there's a big campaign that happened and we had someone like that we could suddenly get all this momentum. Because with Ron Paul in 2007, with the Giuliani moment, podcasting and YouTube and all those things were not what they are today. I mean, it was TV was the big audience you could get. So having a debate moment like that was huge. What was that? That was 2007, was 16 years ago now. But now things are different. Like, to get those messages out, you just need Twitter or YouTube or to go on a podcast. And Dave does that all the time. And not just Dave, tons of people do that all the time. Tons of people from the Libertarian Party are on all these shows all over the place all the time. And I don't think that there is like a second reawakening, another Ron Paul movement taking place, whatever people, were hoping for. So I think waiting for that moment has been, has not been fruitful. So I don't think that moment is necessarily ever going to come. I don't think it will come. Which is not an encouraging message, I know, but it's kind of what I started this podcast out by saying, that like I've just realized that most people don't want this. They might like certain aspects of it sound good, but at the end of the day, people want to blame their problems on somebody else. They don't ever want to take responsibility and do something to better their own lives and, try to change their own lifestyles. It's always some other external problem. Libertarians and basement dwelling computer warrior libertarians, like a lot of computer warrior libertarians, they just like to sit and complain about the Federal Reserve. If there were no Federal Reserve, I'd probably be a business owner. It's like, well, probably not, dude. You probably, even if everything were a perfect free market world, you would probably still be sitting in your basement on your computer. Like if you're not out there trying to make something out of your life right now, you'd probably be no different if we lived in a libertarian society. But I feel like that's just the way most people are. Most people are never going to want to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and actually make their lives better. So I don't know. I guess I'm the doom and gloom guy, but that's just that's just kind of what I think at this point.
Yeah, well, like I said at the beginning, you've had kind of an evolution from when I first noticed you like a couple of years ago to now. It's just been interesting to watch that. And I think you're right on 99% of that. The only thing I would push back on a little bit, and if you can call it that, is it would be nice to see someone like Dave or Spike or Clint or like Larry Sharp be on a debate floor on live television and debate these guys and make them look like fools, that sort of thing. But as far as everything else, you really don't need that platform to get the message across, that sort of thing. Dave's been doing a great job going on Rogan and Timcast, and same thing with someone like Clint or Spike. I know that he hasn't been on Rogan, but yeah. So I want to transition a little bit. You've had some interesting jobs, and you might be one of the hardest working guys that I've ever seen. So, I want to commend you on that. And
Thank you.
You might not think it's anything because it's normal to you, but from an outside perspective, it does go noticed, So when I first noticed you were a trucker. So how did you get into that, and how long did you do it? You said you moved from New Hampshire to Utah, back to New Hampshire, that sort of thing. And then you have a new job. So can you talk a little bit about all those things?
Sure. So this new job I have is actually a job I've had 4 other times, but I've never gotten laid off, and I've never gotten fired, and I've left every single job I've worked with a positive rapport with my boss, and I've always given plenty of notice that I was going to leave. But I've liked to jump around a little bit. I've liked to do different things. I've lived in different places. So 10 years ago in 2013, I graduated high school in 2012, and I worked at a lumber yard, and I got my tractor trailer license when I was at the lumber yard so that I could work for my uncle working on power lines. My uncle owned, now my cousin owns it. It's where I work now, but my uncle owned a utility company that was a contractor for the utilities in New Hampshire. So the electric utilities that have the power lines, there's 3 major utilities in New Hampshire, and they hire out contractors to do the stuff that they're basically not capable of doing. So off-road jobs or storm repair or big, giant pole setting, like all this stuff that they just don't have the equipment for, they hire them out. So after I got my tractor trailer license, I went and started working for my uncle, and I worked for him for about a year and a half. And so then when I was 20, I moved out to Arizona and lived there for about 4 months. Home. And for about a year, I just traveled around the country with my brother, who was still in high school. But when he got out for summer vacation, we went to 33 states together, all around the country,
Oh, wow.
in my Toyota pickup truck. And then after summer vacation was over, I brought him back to New Hampshire and he went back to school. And then I moved out to Colorado, and I lived in Colorado for about 6 months. So I was 21 at this time, and I worked in Denver, roofing industrial buildings with a bunch of Mexicans for about 6 months, and then skiing in the mountains on the weekends. And then
That's not a bad life right there.
it was fun, man. And then the following summer, my other brother flew out west and met up with me, and we went to the rest of the states. I went to Hawaii and Alaska and made it to all 50 states. And then I moved back to New Hampshire. This was 2016. So in October 2016, I went back to working for my uncle again until the end of 2019. And then in 2020, I moved out to Utah to do heavy haul truck driving because I just wanted to try it, because ever since I got my tractor trailer license, I've liked driving trucks, but obviously working on power lines, I did a lot more than just moving equipment. I was setting poles, running wire, pulling underground, like all sorts of different stuff. So I wanted to just do the trucking. And so I lived out in Utah for 2 years and moved a bunch of big mining equipment and construction stuff. And then in 2022, I moved back to New Hampshire and started working for now my cousin, because my uncle is retired. And so, yeah, I'm back here again. So I've done a little bit of everything. The home repair, I did a lot of plumbing and a lot of toilet replacement. I can replace a toilet really quickly now. And then on the side, I've done mechanic stuff. Like I've replaced the engine in my pickup truck. I've just tried to like learn how to do as many things as I can. I've never been to college or taken any courses that I had to pay for. Everything that I've learned how to do, I've gotten paid to learn how to do, or done for free without having to pay for it. So I think a lot of young people should try to do that. I mean, people will spend thousands of dollars on a degree that they don't know that they'll even be able to get a job for, when there are people who will hire you and pay you to become an electrician or pay you to become a plumber, as long as you sign like a 2-year contract or something. So there's lots of opportunities to become skilled and get paid to become skilled, instead of just paying thousands of dollars and then just hoping for the best.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about living without that type of debt. Just getting into some kind of field where, like you said, they'll pay you to apprentice or internship, and you learn a skill, and then you're set up for however long you want to do that job, as opposed to building up and racking up thousands of dollars in debt, that sort of thing. Yeah, I'd say there's a huge advantage in that. And I think in the past maybe 5 or 10 years, that notion has probably gained a little more momentum than it used to, as opposed to the regular, like, go to college, get a degree type of career path.
Yeah, I think it has. I do think that some of it is actually overvalued. Like the amount of money you can make being a plumber right now is just ridiculous, or being being a lineman. I mean, it's just crazy how much money you can make. it hasn't always been that way. I mean, in the past, you did make more money if you went to college, but things have changed now. And what it is because so many people went to college and so many people were told, you're never going to be successful if you work with your hands, that fewer and fewer and fewer people started going into these fields. So now there's a crazy demand for people who have these skills. I mean, if you have a CDL, you can get a job almost anywhere. If you have, I mean, people are scrambling for help everywhere. So if you have some sort of skill in the construction field, it's very, very easy to become employed. But I think it's slightly overvalued because of the lack of people who have gone into it over the last few decades. So I imagine it'll swing back the other way a little bit over the next, couple decades or so. But right now we're in one of those weak men creating hard times phases. So you're going to be in a lot better place if you know how to do things and you know how to fix things and work with your hands in the coming years, I think, for sure.
Yeah. And one of the things that you said on Naturalist Capitalist, this is kind of a thread, but it's connected. One of the things you said on your podcast, on one of your episodes, was back when you're trucking, you had a lot of solidarity and you weren't working with people, and you had a lot of time to think and like listen to podcasts that you like and formulate thoughts about those and stuff like that, as opposed to your new job. You're on a job site where it's loud and people are communicating with each other, and you have people in front of you and behind you and yada yada yada. And so you've kind of slowed down. Well, you've slowed down podcasting a little bit because of that. And then you also mentioned that you've said, a lot of what you wanted to say already, that sort of thing. Are you coming back towards the center of that, or are you still in that headspace?
Yeah, well, I gave a speech at Pork Fest and it was supposed to be like 45 minutes long, but I think I spoke for like 12 minutes or something. And um I mean,
Public
I'm
speaking's hard, man.
well, it's not even that as much as I can pontificate on something if I have to for a while, but it's just like, why? why? Why just make your mouth move and have noises come out if you don't have to? If you could say something concisely, then you might as well. And this is just the way I've always been. Like, I believe it or not, I really don't like to read books. Like, it's very rare that I'll sit down and read a novel because I actually just get impatient reading it. It's just like, okay, stop describing how the wind is going over the grass in the field. Just tell me what's happening. I read lots of articles. I read lots of, I'm more into like, if I want to research something, I'm going to go find out that information and read it. I don't enjoy reading as a like relaxation deal, like I won't sit down and read a story. I've always just been the guy who like goes for what happened. I want to read about this and figure out what happened here and what happened there. And so I'm kind of the same way when I'm talking. Like I could like give a really long winded speech about something, but I might as well just kind of get to the point and say what I think and mean what I say. And I've been like that with my Substacks. My Substacks are pretty short and to the point. When I was on the safety committee at a company I used to work for, the safety officer was writing these toolbox talks for us to read in the morning, and he'd want to make them like 3 pages long. And I told him, dude, if you want people to read those things in the morning, make them a few paragraphs, because then people will actually read them, first of all, but also the point you're making will stick harder because they don't have to pay attention for as long. You can just say, hey, this is what you got to do that, and don't do this, and good enough. So I've just been, that's just kind of the way I am. Like, I feel like if you can say something concisely and in a short message, you might as well do that instead of, just extending it forever. And I don't know, like I feel like with everything we're going through now, it's a lot of repetition from the past. We've seen, the propaganda for trying to start a war with China is very similar to the propaganda that was trying to get us into war with Russia. Um, I've gotten emails asking if we should have another stimulus package to fight inflation. And it's just like, God damn it. If people can't catch on to this by now, that printing off more money isn't going to solve inflation, like what am I going to do? So I found that over the last several months, if people have a question about something going on, I can just send them a podcast that I did like a year ago that covered that thing. Like if they want to know about the Uyghur genocide, I've got a few different podcasts that I could give them. If they want to know about inflation or the world reserve currency status, like I could send them a podcast I did with Peter Schiff 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. So a lot of it, I just like feel like, okay, well, what's the point of like just doing this all the time? Like it takes a lot of energy to put out all these podcasts, and with my job I'm doing now, it's kind of hard having the time to be able to do it all the time. So I don't know, like people can just kind of go see what I've already said. So I don't know, like I don't know what the future of the podcast looks like. I haven't done one for 2-3 months now. And I thought I either need to start doing them more regularly, or I need to just say, okay, that's it, I'm done and I'm not doing anymore. But then I was like, you know what? I don't really need to do that. I can just, if I ever have time to do one and I feel like I have something important to say, then I'll just do one and say what I have to say. And so that's where it is. And I just really haven't had that much to say recently. So when I feel like I have something that needs to be heard and people need to consider, then I'll put one out, I guess.
I think that's a great way to do it. I haven't been doing this that long or as long as you, but um, in the beginning I was stressing about putting out one a week was kind of my goal, and I was stressing about having a guest on once a week, and like what would happen if I couldn't do that, and like I don't particularly want to monologue an episode, that sort of thing. And just built and built, and I got kind of to the point recently where um, I'm all right with skipping a week or two if I don't have a guest or I don't have something particular to say. And I think that's okay. I, I'm doing this for fun, and I'm
Yeah.
doing it to learn from, to learn from myself, and then also to, uh, help others learn that are in my immediate circle that may not listen to the same stuff that you and I listen to, daily. Um, but yeah, I think it's okay to just, not stress about it. I'm not, it's not going to be fun if I'm stressing about it, that sort of thing. So I definitely feel you there. Where are you at with all of the 2024 candidates?
Oh,
Do
I'm
you,
gonna
do you
vote for
like any of them, or?
right now I'm gonna vote for Trump, honestly. Which is crazy because I've never voted for him yet. And I don't like him. I mean, he was a horrible president, but the way I look at it right now, the libertarians are a joke. I mean, just forget it. Robert F. Kennedy is interesting. I'll give him that. And he is definitely better than Biden. And I would even say that on the issues, he's probably the best out of all the candidates. But where he completely lost me was he just got called an anti-Semite once, and he just instantly completely backpedaled and was like, okay, fine, you know what, like we might go to war with Iran if we have to, and I can't believe that Joe Biden isn't as pro-Israel as I would be, and here I'll do all these interviews with all these rabbis about how non-anti-Semitic I am. And so he just showed
He's
that he
180'd
had,
on a couple of things.
yeah, he just showed that he has no spine at all. And don't take this to mean that Trump has any spine or is going to do what he says he's going to do, because he doesn't and he won't. But my reasoning for voting for Donald Trump is not because he's good. My reasoning for voting for Donald Trump is like, fuck it all. Who cares? I mean, it doesn't matter who the president is. And Trump is just a bit of a hand grenade and makes everything insane. So I'd just kind of rather have him back at this point. I mean, I feel like as far as um, decentralization goes, he's the best guy to get back in there because he's just going to cause more and more chaos. And I just RFK just gives me really phony dissident vibes. Like most intelligent people don't really think that Donald Trump is a dissident. They just realize he's an annoyance more than anything. Where RFK really has hoodwinked a lot of people into thinking that he, is some sort of anti-regime dude, and I just really don't think he is. I mean, he says a lot of great stuff about Ukraine. He says some good stuff about China too, but seeing him just cuck so easily to the Israel lobby over being called a name a couple times, it's just like, dude. And then it wasn't even just that. I mean, the gun thing too. Like he has been pretty pro gun control in the past, and then he came out and said, I'm not going to take anyone's guns. And then his first town hall, he said, I will sign an assault weapons ban if the Democrats and Republicans have a consensus. So it's not even his position on guns. I would be more likely to vote for him if he had been consistently anti-gun and just said, nope, this is my position. This is what I think. Because then at least I know on the other things, all right, this guy actually has a sack and, is really standing for these things. Or the same with Israel. If he'd always just been like a really pro-Israel, anti-Iran cuck, I'd be less put off by him than I am now. The flimsy, like flip-flopping, looking for some sort of approval from people who are never going to give it to him, that just really turns me off. So if those are our options, like I'll just take the orange dumbass because at least he's funny and he kind of exposes everybody. It's not like he is ever telling the truth really, unless it's by accident, but he just brings out the worst in everybody and they just become transparently awful and admitting things that they never would want to admit. And I remember when we were trying to pull out of Syria when he was still president and he was keeping troops there. And he said, I'm keeping troops there to protect the oil fields. And so many people were so mad that he would say that. But he was just being honest. Like, yeah, that is why we're in Syria, for the oil. It's not for protecting people from Assad or something. Like, it has nothing to do with that. So having someone in there who will just be a dumbass and say that type of stuff accidentally sometimes and kind of be like a mirror that's being held up to the establishment, at this point, fuck it. Like, that's good enough for me. So that's where I am. A sort of ironic Trump 2024.
Where are you at with DeSantis and Vivek?
So DeSantis, I think, is the worst candidate running. I would rather have Biden than DeSantis. Like, DeSantis to me, and I think people are finally starting to see through this, he's just Jeb Bush. I mean, he's just like a dyed-in-the-wool neocon, awful establishment Republican who was sort of good on COVID, even though it was late. And I think people were just sucking his balls way too long. It was like, guys, come on, this guy's really not that good, especially if you're not living in Florida. He was an okay governor on a very important issue later on down the road, but Jesus Christ, like he's so bad. I mean, if you look at his voting record in Congress, which he was in Congress for 8 years, so there's plenty to look at. He didn't just vote for bad bills. He sponsored tons of awful bills. I have a Substack I wrote about this, and it links to his congressional page. All these bills that he sponsored, like for sanctioning countries around the world, going after terrorist groups and trying to fight them around the world. He's awful. Vivek is, I don't know, like he's interesting. I mean, I don't think he's the worst guy ever. And I actually think he might outperform DeSantis. I was wrong about DeSantis. I really thought DeSantis had potential as a politician. I thought he was really doing a good job fighting the media when he was governor of Florida. I thought he was really going to put up a fight with Trump, but it doesn't seem like he really is. I mean, that campaign is just falling flat on his face. So Vivek,
The more I find out about DeSantis, the less I like him, because
he's awful.
I started off, I don't know, a year ago, 9 months ago, as him as my front runner, and the more I've learned about him, the less I like him. So yeah.
Yeah,
And
no,
I'm sorry to interrupt. What were you saying about Vivek?
he came to PorkFest and he gave a speech, and he's also interacted with us from the Libertarians from New Hampshire. Like, if we tag him in a post and ask him a question, he'll typically answer it. So I don't know, like, he's interesting. And I was saying he might actually overtake DeSantis. I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes the VP candidate, or becomes the challenger to Trump. That would all be very interesting. He does suck really bad on a couple big issues, like the drug war, in my opinion. Like, I realized that he wants to legalize marijuana and a couple things like that. But if you're willing to go to war with the cartels in Mexico, I mean, we're talking about all sorts of issues, not even related just to drugs anymore. I mean, if you're really willing to do that, you're going to cause all sorts of problems along the border of Mexico in the United States. You could see kidnappings take off like they never have before. I mean, like, all you got to do is look at Syria and ask, do we really want that on the southern border of the United States? I don't think so. So, I mean, that's just an absolutely awful idea. He's really bad on Taiwan and China. But I don't know. He seems pretty good on Ukraine. And he seems kind of quasi-libertarian when it comes to economics. So, given the awful field we have, he's, I don't know. He's an interesting person to look into. I don't, when you're voting for a candidate, I really don't think that you have to be a purist, because your vote isn't like somehow an endorsement of every position they've ever held. I mean, I've voted for the lesser of two evils before. I'm going to this time when I vote for Trump. But it's important to be honest with yourself about what you're voting for. And that's what people usually don't do. They'll, once they start campaigning for somebody, or once they decide they're going to vote for someone, they just start attaching all these fantastical views that are not reality to their candidate. Like in New Hampshire last year, so many people somehow were trying to claim that Don Baldock was anti-war, which was just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, now he's stumping for Nikki Haley. And, before he ran for Senate, he had been supportive of like every single conflict that had ever happened. He was upset that we weren't sending enough aid to Ukraine. He wanted to get into a war with China. He wants to go after North Korea and Iran. Like, just absolutely awful dude. And I had supporters blue in the face, like yelling at me that he is really anti-war. So, like, if you're a libertarian who says, you know what, I think I'm going to vote for Don Baldock because he's just not quite as bad as Maggie Hassan, and I agree with him on economics more and guns more. Like, if there's a person who's really being honest about the situation, then I don't have as much of an issue with it. It's when you're lying to yourself about how good somebody is in order to justify it, that's when I think it's bad.
Yeah, in the case of Vivek, I think he needs to clarify on those two issues with China and the southern border a little bit more. I know he went on Part of the Problem, then he went on Liberty Lockdown, and he did. Well, actually, I don't know if he did China on Part of the Problem. He definitely did Ukraine, and then he addressed the southern border stuff with Clint. But I'm kind of with you. I need a little more than that from him. I need a little more clarity on what he means. And it's interesting that he's okay on the Ukraine issue, but then not on China and the southern border. You'd think all three of those he'd make the connection, or anybody would make the connection. If you're this way on one of them, then you need to be this way on all three.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not sure how well thought out some of his thoughts are. I mean, The thing is, he has like this kind of this veneer of honesty that he's like thinking through things as he's running, which I don't know how sincere that is. I mean, um, usually it's usually somebody's not really like that. Usually somebody will like, if they're doing that, it's just because they're trying to win more support over time. I mean, Tulsi did that a lot. Like she did a lot of slow evolutions on her, like her healthcare position or um her gun position or whatever. And it's like, okay, is this really sincere, or is this just because you're realizing you're getting votes from a certain demographic that you weren't really expecting to, so you're trying to soften your message on some of this stuff? And I get those vibes from Vivek. Like he's starting to realize he's getting a lot of libertarian support, so he's like, oh shit, maybe I really need to fine tune this bombing the cartels in Mexico stance I have, or this anti-China stance I have. So I don't know. I just don't. I don't think it's. I don't think it's necessarily that
Yeah,
sincere, I guess.
I really hope he is sincere and he's learning along the way. I know that's a lot to ask of someone. But dude, I really hope he is not like a snake, that sort of thing. I don't think he is right now, but I'm definitely aware that that could be the situation, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to move a little bit to the most recent LPNH drama or controversy.
Sure.
So you guys responded to a tweet from Nina Turner, and her tweet was insulin should be free, medicine should be free. And your response, or Libertarian Party of New Hampshire's response, was Nina Turner picking crops should be free. And I think I want you to explain a little bit about that first. But just so you know where I'm at, I think it was perfectly edgy, and I'm on board with it. You know, I think the audience will understand kind of where you're coming from, and um, your desired end goal with these types of tweets if you explain it a little bit more.
Yeah. So you got to think about who is the audience you're trying to reach. Like some people think we're trying to reach white supremacists or something, but believe it or not, white supremacists tend to not like libertarianism very much. I mean, like they might like that, we don't support Israel or something, but that's about as far as the romance goes. And pretty quickly they're like, oh, you guys think gays should be allowed to get married? And so the romance falls apart pretty quickly. That type of tweet is designed to trigger certain people and show a transparent lack of understanding on Nina Turner's part to a different group of people. So to people like you, or to people like a lot of people who read that tweet, they saw the obvious statement that there's no difference between saying someone has to do this for free or someone has to do this for free. If you're compelled to provide a product or a service for free, then that is slavery. And so, of course, people took that to all sorts of different levels. People were saying that you guys said that making free insulin is exactly the same as being a slave in the antebellum South in the 1840s. And it's like, okay, if that's not what was said, it was an obvious edgy tweet that we wanted liberals to have that reaction to. But people who we are trying to message to, who are like really based libertarians who see through all the bullshit, they're going to see that and see that we're obviously saying that no, this means that you support slavery in essence. And so, I mean, there's a lot of tweets we've put out like that in the past where we don't really care if liberals are interpreting it as racist or homophobic or whatever. In fact, we kind of want liberals to interpret it that way, but the people who can see through that, we want them to interpret the obvious libertarian meaning behind the message. We do have a really interesting, like, we do have a lot of like alt-right people who follow the account, but we also have a lot of communists who follow the account because, you know, we'll treat something about how China is not an enemy to the United States, and we'll get thousands of communist followers over it because they're like, yeah. So we're not trying. It's just like when we tweet something like that one that we tweeted the other day, we'll probably get a bunch of, you know, neo-Nazi followers out of it. And it's not that they're going to be the type of people who want to join us, because just like the communists who followed us over the China tweet, they're going to see something else that we tweet and they're going to be like, wow, yeah, we're not really, we're not really with these people. So, I mean, if you scroll through LPNH's Twitter long enough, it's very obvious where we stand on every single issue. I mean, there's nothing unlibertarian about any of the stances we hold. But those edgy tweets, see, here's the thing is someone from LPNH could have tweeted that, you know, they could have said just that, like, compelling someone to provide a service or a product for free is slavery, and, you know, might have gotten like a couple hundred likes or something. This made headlines. This tweet made headlines. It got national attention. The Young Turks did a whole piece on it. And you had, you know, millions of people reading news stories talking about how libertarians think provide, you know, providing services for free is the same thing as slavery. And so I realize I totally understand why people don't like that, why people think it's counterproductive. But like at this point in the game, we've been a party for over 50 years now, and we've gotten nothing, like absolutely nothing. You know, we're dead in the water. So maybe we should try something that's, you know, a little bit of a different strategy. Try something that's going to get us into the news, get people talking about us. And I think a person who really exemplified this strategy was Donald Trump. Like, Donald Trump got endless free news coverage when he ran for president. And it's because he would say dumb, retarded shit and people would talk about it for days. So if you can mix that recipe of saying like stupid, retarded shit and mix it with a little bit of composition and truth, then, or sorry, not with a little bit of exposition and truth, if you can like really get an idea out there along with a crazy tweet that you're going to put out, then you can really get people talking about your ideas. And the type of people that you actually give a shit about, the type of people who aren't going to, you know, like think, oh, you're racist, or oh, you're homophobic, or oh, you're, you know, a crazy conspiracy theorist, whatever. The type of people that you're actually trying to reach are going to see that, and they're going to be interested in what you have to say. And in New Hampshire, especially, we don't really believe in the national conversion strategy that a lot of the people in the Libertarian Party still believe. Like I laid out earlier in this episode, I don't think most people are ever going to be libertarian or ever going to want to be libertarian. So we really believe in messaging to people who already do share our values and saying, this is where you belong. You should move to New Hampshire. Libertarian concentration is the only way out of this. So that's our strategy. I would be lying if I said I didn't understand why people have issues with it. I mean, it's obvious. We're a bunch of edgelord trolls. So of course people are going to have issues with it. When people say, you don't see how this can be misinterpreted as racist, like, of course I see how that tweet could be misinterpreted as racist. Of course
That's the point.
That's the point.
That's the point, to get that reaction out of certain people.
Yeah. But to the people that I care about, like, I mean, Olivia Rondo, one of my good friends, she's a black woman, and she tweeted out in support of that. Another guy, I don't know his first name, but he has a Twitter, middlemaga.com, another black guy who loved the tweet. Like,
was it Maj?
No, it was not Maj. He was not a fan. But yeah, you know, like I don't know. I don't really care if we're pissing off. If we're pissing off identitarians, it doesn't matter to me, because I frankly want those people to be pissed off.
Yeah, and I think the deal is, like you said earlier, you could have said the same thing a different way, and you might have had a couple hundred views. but now I don't even know how many views you have, but I'm sure it's hundreds of thousands, millions maybe. And I went back to try to find the original tweet, and I had to scroll for a very long time on LPNH to find the original one, right?
Yeah.
And that was what, a couple days ago. So this has been going on. You've had a continuous conversation about this with various people for days. So that one tweet has led to all these different interactions, bad or good or otherwise. But surely, like, maybe that's people have read the follow-up positions and clarifications after that tweet, and maybe they gained something from that. Maybe they learned something, So
Yeah.
I'm a fan of what y'all do. I think if you want to look at a master class in trolling, just follow LPNH.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a fan of how y'all do things, and I think everything has its place, and it's not going to be everybody's flavor, but I think it has its place, and it's doing good work. And just to clarify, it's three of you, right?
More than looking at our page, there's 3 of us who typically tweet, but there are 5 of us who have the keys to the account, and then there's like 10 of us who are in a comms chat where we kind of bounce ideas off each other. Sometimes we're unilaterally posting, sometimes we're collectively trying to come up with a good tweet, but a banger like that is almost always fired from the hip by one of us.
Really?
And sometimes we can't even tell who it is. Like sometimes amongst the 5 of us, we don't know who tweeted something because we've all become pretty similar in our strategy. But more than looking at our page, go look at Nina Turner's page for the last 3 days. I mean, she's broken. It's amazing to watch. So if you can ever get to the point where you're inside somebody's head and they can't get you out, like we did that with Meghan McCain too. Meghan McCain was tweeting about us for days. She quote tweeted our tweet of her crying over her father's casket like 6 times, and that is
that one was
true
savage.
Power. Yeah, that's true power right there, when you have the enemy like reeling because you just owned them so good and they don't know what to do with it. So yeah, I think it's a very effective strategy.
Well, we're coming up on it. Well, we're past an hour. Reed, one last thing I wanted to ask you is, I don't want to call it, there's been a lot of like black-pilled stuff on this episode. There might be a better word for that because I don't think it's completely black-pilled. But if anything, do you have any white-pilled thoughts moving forward with the Libertarian Party and everything that's going on?
Not with the Libertarian Party, to be honest. Like, I think the Mises Caucus takeover, I think there have already been takeovers in the past, and there will be more in the future, and it'll just kind of ebb and flow. Like, we'll have good candidates, bad candidates, but I really don't think that libertarianism to create a movement. So like in New Hampshire, the culture already exists to make liberty possible. So in New Hampshire, and I know this is true in a lot of rural towns in Texas too, like you could have a farm stand with produce sitting on a table and a box to drop the money into, and you could trust people that they were just going to drop the money in and take whatever they paid for, and then at the end of the day you can just go out there and get your box of cash. Like if you tried to introduce Ancapistan to Portland, Oregon right now, it wouldn't work because the people there are not they're not interested in that type of lifestyle. And I think that just really predicates everything else. So I guess the white pill is like, if you live in a community where you could trust your neighbor, and you can continue to build a community of trust, that is the best way to advance liberty in your lifetime. I mean, I know I talk a lot about moving to New Hampshire, but even if you don't move in even if you don't live in New Hampshire, if you live in Texas or Louisiana or Massachusetts or wherever, the best thing is to live in an area where you can trust your neighbor. And then if you can't even do that, at least try to live in a way that you're making your own life better. Like, keep yourself out of debt, keep yourself out of entangling agreements that you don't want to be part of. Like, just do things that are going to better your own life. And that is the best way to advance liberty. It's not through voting for somebody. It's not through donating to a political party. It's just through living your life in a way where you can be responsible. So that's my white pill, is that ultimately you are responsible for how free you are.
Awesome. Well, do you want to shout anything out before we go? Any plugs?
Sure. Yeah, I will be on Timcast again on August 9th. So look out for that. I don't know when I'll be doing my next podcast, but for whenever that is, just check out the Naturalist Cap. And,
I'm sorry, buddy. You cut out again.
All the podcasting platforms. I just said, just check out the Naturalist Capitalist, and you can check out my next show whenever I put it out.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, I appreciate you being here. Reed, I appreciate you being here, and I really enjoyed this conversation. Guys, if you will hit me with a like and a follow, that helps a lot. And we will see you next time. Thanks.